So, first of all, what's up, man? I guess maybe, I don't know, do the usual stuff like, hey, what's up? How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Had a bit of a tough day today, but all's well that ends well. Me vipi? Tudo vipi?
Me poor. Everything's all good. Tuko up and Moses. Moses is good.
Man, we're back at work.
Oh,
Yeah, social distancing, barakoas, sanitizers, and all that stuff.
I guess we're ready for this thing here, man. We're going to do it like the way we did it back in them days. Let's get into BAL. I want to ask you, I want to ask you, I don't want to come out with my thoughts first. I would like to ask you first, what do you think of BAL, B-A-L? What do you think of BAL and what it means for Africans? What do you think?
It is, I have a bittersweet feeling about it. It is a good showcase for African basketball, but I think it's a bigger business for the NBA. It's because we have, for example, all these products coming from the NBA and the American market to the basket, to the game.
Right.
Like the apparel is gonna be Nike and the MJ brand and all that. So there's a side of business that is not benefiting the African content as such. But again, we haven't had such competitive games for African basketball for quite some time. So although it sheds a lot of light on our basketball, but there are some things which are still not exactly right. And I want to accept and move with them because it's the first, it's just inaugural. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of improvements made in the future. And Amadou is a very knowledgeable guy, so I know whatever is wrong is going to be made right as we move forward. But I just have a feeling there's something still missing a little bit to make it our basketball game per se.
It's funny you say our basketball per se, because I want to ask you something I came across. I was doing some reading about BAL and just basketball in general in Africa. And I went to FIBA basketball and I looked at their history, FIBA African history. And there's a statement that stood out. It reads, at FIBA's 6th Congress held on the 30th and the 31st August 1960 in Rome, Italy, the Egyptian Basketball Federation was allowed to organize a general assembly in order to set an institution to rule African basketball. All right. Now, when I read that sentence, what's your understanding?
Well, first off, the word, I cringe a little bit at the word rule. especially if it was in 1960, and given everything that was going on with movements to liberate African countries or independence efforts, the word rule just brings up some negative connotations. But it does. But but if you're giving them the benefit of the doubt that they didn't mean it in that way, it kind of means that they were setting up an organization to oversee the development of the sport, even even as far back as the 60s. So at least it tells me that had been a thought process to include the rest of the African continent, or maybe it's a recognition that as more African countries gain their independence, it's going to be important to include them in the process of developing the sport all over the continent. So that's the first natural thing that comes to mind.
Well, that's fair enough. Well, to put more light into the matter, this is actually a communication that's on FIBA's website. on FIBA's African history. It's actually up there right now. This is the communication that they have. So even though it was 1960, but this is being communicated as we speak. And then there's something else that I also want to add to that. All right, something that I felt it was slightly similar to that. All right, Zito Madu, I guess he's a writer for OK Africa. He conducted an interview with John manyo-plange or Plange. I'm not quite sure if I'm pronouncing his name right? But he's a vice president of BAL, BAL in Africa, right? So let me just refer to him as John, because I don't know if I'm pronouncing his last name correctly. Well, Zito asked him, what difficulties did you encounter in setting the BAL, the BAL? And this is what John had to say. He said, I think it's too early to say what all those difficulties are, since we're still in the process of building the league now, setting up infrastructure. The whole process is going on as we speak. But to get to the point of where we could bring it to fruition, we first had to build a foundation for the sport on the continent. Now, there are two things here, right? Okay, there are two things that kind of like bring the two statements together, right? I feel like they're not giving credit to the indigenous people. You say our basketball, but at the FIBA Congress, they say go and rule African basketball, meaning that they were given the mandate by the people that own basketball in Africa. And then here we have the vice president of BAL talking about the whole process is going on as we speak. But to get to the point of where we could bring it to fruition, we first had to build the foundation for the sport on the continent. BAL or NBA Africa had to come to Africa and build it. What do you feel about those statements? How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, it gives me that same feeling that I was talking about before. Like there's a touch missing. There's a disconnect somewhere. It takes, now you've put it clearer even, it takes away the effort that has been made by people like you, for example. There's so many people like you in our country, in our continent, and all over the place that are actually pushing for local skill to be developed. And that not being recognized or that being taken as a lesser effort is actually disrespectful.
I don't know. I really don't. I really, like, again, so again, I go back to, it depends on what you mean by foundation. If you're talking about foundation for the sport in general, then maybe what's already there, in their view, isn't up to snuff or isn't good enough for what they're trying to do with the Basketball Africa Wide League. You might find fragmented bits of development here and there, but the actual foundation, what it takes to develop and, to develop, run, and sustain, and like an Africa-wide league, requires a different setup than what is currently available right now. That's how I would look at it, was when you say foundation. But then again, so maybe it's a poor choice of words, I don't know, but foundation for the sport, yeah, again, it depends on, without understanding what the person means when you say foundation for the sport, it's hard to, all you can do is speculate on what they might mean.
I think my thoughts are, it's not so much that, they're not doing a great job or anything like that, but I feel like as an entity coming to Africa and working with Africans, it's very important to give credit to indigenous people, and number two, to work in a partnership format, not so much that we're coming to rule or we're coming to establish or build the foundation. Like we are the saviors. Even though all those different, the two different entities actually do work with Africans, but all the credit still goes outside. Like they're the ones who are bringing the change. You get what I'm saying? It's not so much that Africans actually bringing that change. No, it has to be a foreign entity coming to Africa to save Africans because Africans can't do it themselves. I mean, that's the narrative.
Which is very wrong. Which is very, very wrong. It's that's a disconnect I feel that is there. I mean, we thank them for what they're doing. It's good, but there is work that has already been done here. So that statement that you just said, where somebody saying that they came and built a foundation, had to build a foundation, that's wrong. If you compare it to construction terminologies, the foundation was already here. We already had people doing the work at the grassroots. This is just support that we're getting for what has already been done before. And like you say, it has to be a collaborative kind of effort where we work together. Right. Yeah, not as a rulership or something to that tune.
First of all, I want to make it very, very clear. I am very happy that, you know, BAL is actually here. I think it's a very important tool that we could utilize to actually unify and bring Africans together. You know, it will mean so much to a lot of African nations, you know, in terms of them working on their immigration policies. It will tackle all those issues, you know, and Africans as a whole, you know, the trade within Africa is so poor, but now you're going to have, you know, all these athletes constantly traveling back and forth and then, you know, working elsewhere and, you know, originating from else. It's just, you have to tackle the immigration aspect of it and the business aspect of it and taxation and everything like they're going to tackle. It's just going to do wonders to a lot of African governments. They will have to address all these issues. So I feel like BAL is doing Africa a huge, huge, huge service in terms of that. But in addition to that, it is important, it is very, very important how we welcome this change and what effect. Because, you know, nothing is 100% bad or nothing is 100% good. To every good, there is bad. To every bad, there is good. So all the good that's coming, we just got to be careful how much bad is going to be coming along with the good. And what is the long-term effect? I mean, you get what I'm saying, right? We really need to be careful with that.
If you're talking about it from a purely communications point of view, then I can definitely see how, you know, like how one would draw that conclusion. And again, it's, you know, you can also look at it as a little bit of a pissing contest between the two organizations. Like, hey, we came in here, we found everything, you know, like we didn't find anything to work with. We had to build it. Oh, what are you talking about? We've been here since the 60s and we set up an organization that was set up to, you know, to actually oversee this whole thing, you know. So yeah, I'd agree with you.
But regardless of what you're saying, it's the two of them competing, saying that we're irrelevant. That's still the same thing. That Africans are irrelevant. They came here and they're fighting over who did what for Africans because we can't do it. You're still saying the same thing.
Yeah, which is why I said, again, from a public, you know, like from a public perception point of view, it doesn't look good. Or from a public relations point of view, it does not look good.
Yeah, but it's our job. It's you and I. We got to keep all these entities coming out here. We got to keep them honest, and we got to make sure that we constantly, you know, talk to people and actually make them aware of what's really happening. It's not everything that glitters is not gold. All right, everything that glitters is not gold. But hey, I am all for BAL being in Africa. I want to make that very clear. I'm not against BAL, and I'm not against FIBA.
Maybe I'm an optimist, maybe, but given the age, you know, like the age in which we live, and considering, so so I look at two things. It's kind of looking at, you know, like at a person's, you know, like at someone's actions versus what what someone has said, right? So everyone slips up every once in a while. That's how I look at it, right? Like nobody's perfect and organizations aren't that. And given the fact that both me and you are economists and we know, I work in the development industry, you know, there are, sometimes there is a bit of sometimes the messaging can come across as a bit, with some entities, it can come across as a bit savior-like. Oh, we've come, we've done this, we've done that, we've done that, and failing to acknowledge the contributions of the people, of what the people had done prior to your assistance, you know what I mean? So, but then again, when I look at, I can't speak to what FIBA has done, because to be perfectly honest, if you ask me to point to one particular thing that FIBA has done, I couldn't point to it, and I'm damn near 30, and I'm almost 40. So but if you ask me to point to, what the NBA has done, and, just sort of grow the sport, I can, and not just in Tanzania. All right. So I do think the statements convey an image that, like a bit of an inconsiderate image, that there was that does not take into account the contributions or the work that that Africans have done to grow the sport. I think it does look, the two messages do kind of look like it's a bit of a pissing contest between the two of them. And one organization, in my view, should really pipe down, because I mean, what exactly have they done? I'm sure they have done stuff, but maybe they just haven't been good at publicizing it. So I agree with you, but then again, I kind of also I'm weighing that against the actions that, that entities like the NBA have actually taken, that you can actually point to and say, yeah, these guys have actually helped, including setting up a basketball without borders, including the junior NBA, including incorporating numerous other individual efforts, or such as Giants of Africa, and like in a whole host of numerous other like camps and player development initiatives by former NBA players or current NBA players, and an effort to to grow the sport, of which the fruits of which you can see with the increased number of African players that are represented in the NBA. So I can point to one organization's contribution and go like, oh, okay, that I can actually see that they've done something, which leads me to give them a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, when it comes to the statements they put out versus, what FIBA put out. But I agree with you, it does not look good, and it's devoid of acknowledgement of what individual countries have done. If you're President Kagame, you've got to be looking at this, a little bit side-eyed, like, what?
Right. It's all perception. So this is how now we figure, if when you drive a certain narrative and people believe in that narrative and all that, what you're actually doing, you're laying out the groundwork to who actually controls, and you giving power to somebody. It's the narrative. That's the way it works.
Yeah.
It's how it's communicated. It's how we perceive.
Exactly.
It's how we sign contracts and everything. This just goes into the system now, and it's groundwork for something even bigger. And this is what I'm talking about. Now, when you don't give people credit, or you think they do not deserve the credit, or you don't acknowledge it, I don't think this is a slip up. I really don't think this is a slip up. Going back to the communication. I mean, I'm sure I would never see anything like this when we talk about the NBA in China. They would never write anything like that, because they will go over it and over it and over it and make sure it is proper. You do not want to offend. Now, this is something I feel like us Africans, we take it for granted. It's okay, man. They're coming, they're helping us. It's not they just helping us. This is a mutual thing. It's going both ways. And people don't see it that way. This is the problem. We don't see it that way. And they driving the narrative that we're helping, and it's being drilled into our heads. And constantly we keep thinking that somebody's coming to save us. And that's the narrative that's going everywhere. We're being saved. This is what I'm talking about. It. By doing so, we're just laying the groundwork for what has happened thousands of years or hundreds of years before us. And it's happening today. It's the same thing that's happening, because everything comes down to the economy. As Bill Clinton put it, it's the economy, stupid.
Economy, stupid.